Hello, loves. Welcome to the Living Out Love podcast. I am I am beside myself. So today is a very, very special day for several reasons. A, you're going to meet a very fabulous human being who also happens to be one of my best friends, and she is an astrologer. And you may have heard my episode a few weeks ago where I talked about that I've been getting into an astrology and that I'll be sponsoring and speaking at an astrology conference. And I will be going with this very special person. So I'm so excited to introduce you to Suzanne Platner. Welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. Definitely been looking forward to this day for so long. Just to, of course, we talk all the time, but to talk with you on this and talk astrology and just all the fun things.
Yeah. So I was going to try to write a bio for you, because I know you so intimately, but I haven't actually known you for that long, like a few years. So, would you just introduce yourself to my listeners? Like, who are you and how did you make your way to astrology?
Sure. So I'm a mom and wife, and I spend most of my days, shuttling kids all over the place. And the rest of my time, I pretty much spend, doing astrology with my friends and doing readings and just living that world. I feel like I'm truly like at my happiest when I'm just diving into just all of the details. And it's been a kind of crazy journey for me. Um, to astrology. I grew up in a very woo house with, my every time anyone had a question about anything, my mom brought out the tarot cards and we went to town. We were all very interested in palmistry and crystal balls and seances and just anything woo that you can think of. That's what I grew up with. And yeah, and so I kind of lived that life until I was a young adult and went off to business school, of all things.
Less woo.
And yes, less woo, definitely. And I really think that was actually very intentional for me. And I can now looking at my chart, I can really see kind of why I made those choices. But I really pulled away from the spiritual world. I called myself an agnostic for many, many years. And it's not that I didn't believe there was something in the beyond, maybe, but I was like, I don't know, who am I to say? And I didn't go to tarot cards. I didn't do any of that kind of stuff for many, many years. And I kind of a little bit like there were parts of that life that I very much always remembered, like past lives were always very strong for me. I just,
Mm.
even though I called myself agnostic, I couldn't really let go of the idea of past lives. And I kind of forgot that part of myself, though, mostly until one day I was reminded of the power of it. And I kind of slowly started diving back in. I started doing moon rituals with my friends and, just reading lots of spiritual books and just, it's hard to describe, but it felt like there was a massive weight lifted off of my shoulders. I came back into my spirituality. And so, I kind of started just going through all of those things, just spirituality in general, manifestation, all of that. And a few years back, my grandma passed away. And I was never very close with her, truth be told, but she was very into astrology. And after she passed away, anytime I would look at anything astrology, it just made sense to me. And it was so weird because, astrology, I always was interested in it, but I would look at things and I'd be like, how does somebody know anything from this chart, this circle and these lines? And I just couldn't. I was like, this is bizarre. I don't think I could ever do that. That sounds crazy. And I feel like she was whispering in my ear and pulling me into this world. And so yeah, ever since then, I've been just, all in.
Ah, you said something really beautiful when you said that when you reconnected with your spirituality, you felt like there was a huge weight lifted. What was the weight that was lifted?
Oh gosh, I think it was just a part of myself that I was denying for so long. And I think it's really hard when you don't really know who you are, and when you don't have this, I think it's hard not to have spirituality just in general in your life, no matter what form of spirituality that is. And yeah, it was just a piece missing. And it was so, once I dived into that, it was like a relief of stress, you know, I think. Yeah.
So I have a really basic question because I feel like people, if there's a lot of people out there that know astrology as like your weekly horoscope, and they
Sure.
know it as a very predictive, like the trope is like, this is the week that you should buy the lotto ticket, you know? And
Yes.
so I would like you to tell me, what is astrology?
Yes, I love it. Is a basic question, and also we could sit here and talk for 3 hours
Right.
about that question.
Right.
Yeah, and the weekly horoscopes and the you should buy a car this weekend or you're gonna fall in love or whatever. I don't prescribe to any of that. So I let's just put that aside, you know. And astrology to me, I kind of see it as two big buckets. And one of those buckets, it's kind of funny. This is really a me thing. I don't think you'll hear most astrologers say this, but one of those buckets for me is just being in tune with the earth and
Hmm.
everything around us.
Yeah, I
And
wasn't expecting that.
yeah, and that's why I say that's really a me thing. That's because I feel like, back hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, people when they lived by the cycles of the moon. And they were very, very much in tune with nature, with the seasons, the cyclical flow of just, going through the yearly seasons, going through the cycles of the moon. And they lived their lives in accordance with those rhythms. And I think that that's such a beautiful and healthy way to live. And so for me, that's kind of one bucket of astrology, is just the fact that it opens up these cycles that if we're following them, I think that we can treat Mother Earth much better, first of all. And I think we treat ourselves better because we're allowing for, this world teaches us to just be the same always. Go to work, 9 to 5, you get the weekends off, you go back to work, take the kids to school. It's the same always, and sure, we get little vacations off, you know. But what if we really lived in summer? What if we really lived in fall? What if we lived that energy that's going on, and we planted the foods that were meant to be planted during that time? And so that part of it is it's it is astrology because it's living by the seasons and the moon and all of that kind of stuff, but it's not so much getting into Sagittarius and things like that.
Right.
But that is truly one of my favorite elements of astrology. And the other piece of it is what you would hear more so often, and that is living, understanding your natal chart and understanding, what it means when we are in all of these other seasons, like, if you're in Virgo season, if going through that, and where is Jupiter right now? Jupiter went retrograde yesterday. What does that mean? And so it's following. When you really dive into the details of astrology in that way, what you start to understand is that it's really basic psychology. You look at your natal chart and you start understanding a lot of things about yourself and who you are and how your mind works and why one thing can be so true about you. And the opposite of that very thing can also be so true about you. And so as humans, this is a very normal experience. We all have these things. Like, why do I sometimes I'm this way and other times I'm this way? And they're so opposite. It doesn't make sense, And you start understanding your astrology and you start seeing that's why. That's why. Because when I'm presented with this situation, what I do when I'm presented with this, it just really helps you understand your own psychology. Um, and it gives you such grace for yourself, for other people, because when you're looking at someone else and you're going, you're a hypocrite, why did you said this 2 weeks ago and now you're saying this? And you start understanding, well, that's because yes, they can be both of those things at the same time. Yes, they can. And they can change their mind at any time that they want. And they're on this earth for a very different reason than I am. I have X gifts because I'm here to do this, but they don't have those same things. They have a whole different set of gifts and a whole different set of detriments, and their purpose is so different than mine. And for me to judge what their purpose is, it's not for me to do. We're here for different reasons. And I think astrology really just helps us to understand it that way.
Yeah. You know, I actually think that astrology is pretty scientific
Hmm.
because it's looking at the actual planets. It's astronomy based, where the planets are in the sky. But
Sure.
one thing that I've noticed in the quote woo community is people that are very interested in A Course in Miracles, which I know is not your background. Um, but one of the things that A Course in Miracles says is that we all have our own highly individualized curriculum. And there are a lot of Course in Miracles people that are very big into astrology because I think if you want to know what your curriculum is, here you go, you know?
Absolutely, yes, it is. It's right there, clear
And
as day.
and I agree with you. It's like if you allow it to give you that frame of reference of this is your chart, this is your experience, it really helps you to jump out of that thing that our brains do where we expect everybody to act the way that we think we would act.
Yes.
It really helps you to kind of deprogram that. Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. I liked your two buckets. And I love, a few episodes back on the podcast, actually, I shared a reading, and the client that I was talking to was talking about climate change. And one of the things that came through was the earth. It was like the earth was saying, like, I want you to enjoy me. I want you to climb my mountains and swim in my rivers and eat of my food, like not to have guilt about enjoying the earth. And this whole idea of like we energetically are taking, but we're also energetically giving to the earth. And it's this like relationship. It's
Yes.
so but it seems so obvious now that you say that, but I hadn't thought about that in the context of astrology and seasons. And of course, like what our relationship with the earth looks like is going to be very different depending on what's happening with her, with.
Yes.
So, wow, that's beautiful. Thank you for tying that together for me.
Yeah, I love that. And it is so true. It is a reciprocal relationship, but we've been taking too much. So we need to give back a little bit and just get in tune with her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me, so I feel like we've talked about the buckets of like what astrology can do. And I have my responses, but why do you think that somebody coming to know whether it's their natal chart or their transits, but where they come to have a more intimate relationship with their astrology, why is it so impactful?
Oh, because I think it shows you perspectives that you could have never gotten to on your own. I think it's like I said a few moments ago. I'm not really into the horoscopes based on your sun sign and that you're gonna get a card and meet someone and blah blah blah. I don't believe in predictions per se. What I believe in is questions. And we can talk about what energy is present right now and how you're favored and what how maybe things are going to be maybe a little bit more challenging. But it's all like I as an astrologer, I can't ever tell somebody anything so specific. All I can do is I can present them with questions. Those internally we all know the answers somewhere in our heads, right? It's hard to get there as because we have too many voices in our heads telling us too many different things. And I think as an astrologer, what I can do is help to quiet some of those voices and highlight others and pose questions that hopefully help the person to understand, why something is happening. And I ideally I want them to answer the question themselves. I want them to 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 get there on their own. I'm going to bring up as much for them as I can. I think it helps people so much to just look into themselves and really see what's going on. Because again, as an astrologer, I can't actually do that. All I can do is give you this energy. and that's available at the moment, or that's always available in you if we're talking about your natal chart. And yeah, pose questions of perspective wouldn't necessarily
Right. And I loved what you said about like that in their minds they might already have the answer. I think you're absolutely right. And sometimes it's like either we're not asking the right question, or it's almost like somebody asking the question gives us the permission.
come. Mm-hmm.
I remember the very first time you read my chart and we talked about Venus ruling my chart and like
Yes.
what all was going on with Venus with me. And I had already had Amy Hageman dot love. Like love was already the focus. But having this better understanding of Venus, it 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 gave me permission in a way where it wasn't like, "Oh, it's love because that's so cute and so sweet." Like it gave me permission to step into like ownership of, no, this is what I'm here to do. And I know it's very powerful and I get to own it the way I feel called to own it
Yeah.
in a way that I didn't have before we had talked about my chart.
Yes, yes, it's so true. And of course, you know, Amy's chart, you guys, points to Venus in about 1,000 different ways. Her chart is clearly ruled by Venus. It's quite amazing. And thank you for bringing that up, because yeah, that is one thing that I didn't mention too, is that sometimes astrology is just validating for people. Sometimes people have just, again, so much chatter in their heads, and they kind of think they're crazy for feeling a certain way.
Yeah.
Or they don't understand. And so sometimes to just come in and say, no, you are this way, and that's okay. And to allow people to really really know that it's okay that you're whatever. That's written in your chart. That is part of your curriculum. And we can talk about high road of certain things and low road of certain things. Which of course means every single sign, if we look at it, has a high road, the just when we're really in touch in a very very healthy way, and a low road version, which we're not doing it so well. And sometimes too, it helps to say to somebody, to validate and show them the high road, and also point out the low road and be like, hey, are you getting into some of these? This is not healthy, and let's point you in this direction.
Here's the other thing I want to say about my experience with astrology that I'm sure you can speak to with several of your clients and not just me
Mm-hmm.
is I've always been a person that's determined to continue to improve myself in some way or another. Like I've always been I want to continue to grow and grow and grow, and I don't want to recognize myself from the year before in a very loving, gentle way. It's not like I'm not an achiever type person, but that's always my bend. And with astrology, I feel like I'm growing so much faster because I can see myself better, and then B, especially when the transits come in and we are talking about, okay, what is the energy that's present in our life right now? It's easier to have an understanding of, oh, this is how I'm being called to show up. Like it just gives so much context to life that whether I'm trying to heal something or whether I'm trying to grow a new skill, it's like I understand the way forward in an entirely different way than I did before I knew anything about astrology.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think sometimes astrology is like a little cheat sheet. And I know we've talked about the word cheat sheet, and I feel like you have a better word for it. Do you remember?
Oh, I call it like a quick reference or like a
A,
reference guide. Like it's
a
a
reference guide, yeah. Yeah,
Cliff
but
Notes.
Cliff Notes, there we go. Yeah, but it is, oh wow, it's so powerful because, okay, if somebody is not into astrology at all, which most people are not, or they're not heavily into it, they're not going to know all of the things. These transits are still going to be happening to them. These lessons are still going to be coming to them. All this energy and everything else. And they're going to get there, if their soul is meant to get there and their soul is doing the right work, they're going to get there. Okay. But like having it kind of like spelled out for you in a way, kind of, sometimes even at the beginning of a transit where you're like, okay, this is where I'm going. Feels a little scary, maybe, depending on the transit. But you kind of like, sometimes you might even have a little freak out moment, and then you gotta calm yourself down, depending on what it is. But then you kind of start to, unravel what's the lesson here. All right, open my eyes for what this lesson is, and how am I meant to improve during this time of my life. And if you already are kind of aware of that, yeah, I just think you're miles ahead. And caveat to that, I do have to say that I am also someone who is very concerned about um so constantly paying it so much attention to astrology where you get wrapped in it. I think the inverse can happen too.
Right. Like you're not
And so
being present.
yes, exactly. Okay, I've got this transit going on. There, you guys, we all have a million transits going on, like literally always. Okay. So if you could look at so many of them, for instance, if we're going to talk about a Mars transit, okay, Mars is a relatively fast moving planet. The Mars transits, they come and go pretty quick, okay? And it's not to say it's not impactful. It may be impactful. It's not going to be probably life changing. The things that are life changing, the longer transits that are happening above, well, quote unquote, above the Mars transit. But sometimes somebody will look at it, something like that, and they'll freak out. And self fulfilling prophecies, people can create a bad day on, because they believe something bad is going to happen. And I really feel like as an astrologer, I have to be so cognizant of that and make sure that people know, like, okay, we shouldn't be paying attention to every single detail because it's so easy to get trapped. And I think it's so important and it's so valuable. And also, make sure that you're living your life, you're being present in the moment, and you don't let astrology control you. You just use it as something to help you to understand what's already going.
Right. And I agree. And because there's so many transits going on, there's no end in sight. You could spend
No
so
end.
much time looking at everything. And I'm realizing that you and I have been talking about transits, and there are probably people listening that don't know what that means. So can you tell us, what is a transit?
Absolutely. Yes, happy to. Okay, so we all are born with a natal chart. This is where the stars were the moment you were born. That never changes. That's hard fast your whole life. Nothing you can do about that. And by the way, your natal chart is perfect for you no matter what. There's no such thing as a bad chart for you and your so transits are when the planets out there that constantly are moving, they come into contact with your natal chart. So we can get real technical and we can talk about those details. I don't think that's what we're here to do, so I'm not going to do that. But more or less, they hit a certain aspect, a certain degree, and they create there's specific angles that mean different things. And so, for instance, if you're having a Pluto transit, Pluto takes a very long time to go around an entire chart. Okay. It's, oh gosh, don't quote me on this. I probably shouldn't say it on the recording because I might get it wrong. It's something like 284 years to go around the sun. And so nobody will ever have every single Pluto transit hitting their chart. It's if when Pluto comes, that's a major transit because it stays for a while. It's so slow moving. It's going to hit something. And when it hits that certain angle, that's going to last for a year or longer. And Pluto is Pluto's known as the excavator. Pluto goes inside and just pulls up like all of the things that maybe you've been trying to hide a little bit. And it wants kind of a death and a rebirth. What Pluto wants. It is the planet of transformation. So knowing that you're about to have a Pluto transit, let's say Pluto comes in and it's going to square your sun. And basically what that means is it's creating a 90-degree angle to you. So Pluto comes in, you're having a Pluto square your sun. You might, that's one of those that you might go, oh my gosh, what's about to happen? Your sun is like your identity, your ego, your sun sign is very, very important. So there's something about your identity that's going to try and be, if we don't know what that is, that can sound very scary, right?
Right.
And also, it's so beautiful because it's always for your higher good, and it's about learning how to move through that. And so, every planet, even some asteroids out there, and different things can create these different angles, and they all last different times. And again, the longer that they last, the more impactful. It's a real slow moving thing. It's just it might affect you that day, not so much. And so it just kind of, the transits are just they don't define who we are the way that our natal chart is. They just kind of, they put a certain energy into the air that um, triggers, if you will. And it's not necessarily in a bad way. Sometimes the word trigger can sound bad. I'm not trying to use it in a negative connotation, but it impacts, maybe it impacts a certain planet in your natal chart, and then those two planets kind of have to learn to work together
Mm.
to continue you on your journey here, body.
Yeah. It was interesting. So, I want to say something for the listeners real quick, and then I'm going to make my point. You said Pluto square Saturn. So, I want to be really clear that Pluto is Pluto in the sky at this moment in time,
Yes,
squaring where your Saturn was the day you were born, your
yes,
Saturn of that original moment you were born.
yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah. We, those of us that are at all familiar with astrology, just take all that stuff for granted. The thing I want to
yes.
say is it's so funny that you use Pluto as an example because when you first started teaching me about my astrological placements, it was right before I was starting some sort of a Pluto transit. I don't remember what it was now. Um, but knowing what the transit was at the time made all the difference because I don't remember what it was because I've healed it and blocked it, but it was so painful at the time, whatever was happening, that as soon as we understood, oh, Pluto's coming in and it's doing this thing to your chart, all of a sudden it felt like, okay, I'm on a roller coaster, but I know I'm on a roller coaster. And I know that this is an opportunity for me. Like Pluto's here either way. And now I know, well, the invitation is death and rebirth. And so I can either choose it and be very mindful of it, or I can be blindfolded on this roller coaster that I didn't know I was on.
Right.
And it's like, you're not going to get the jostle out of life. Like the jostle's still going to be there. But I felt very consciously like, okay, I don't exactly know what to expect, and I'm going to go for a ride. But I also have kind of some ideas about how this might go that would be beneficial and in favor and in my own growth versus, quote, learning things the hard way.
Yeah.
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 Um, oh, it's just so good. So, um, anything else you want to tell us just about your experiences of working with people in their astrology so far? Um, like anything about why, how has it surprised you and how impactful it's been?
Oh gosh. I mean, I feel like it surprises me on the daily, with with how impactful it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, okay, so I consider myself an evolutionary astrologer, which means that I really believe that everything in our charts, in our natal chart, is comes from experiences that we've had in past lives and things that we are here on this earth now to heal. And so what I typically do is I really, really kind of, I love to dive into past lives and kind of go through, like, all right, well, where's your wounding from this past life? Like, why is this placement here? Because you were wounded this way in this past life, and you come here to really heal it. And so it's really remarkable once you start understanding that the story of that soul, and the journey that they've already been through, and um the healing that they literally were, the day they were born, like, or the wounds, I should say, that the day they were born, they already came. And we're both parents, and so I think sometimes as parents we really beat ourselves up about things that are, when we see our children hurting, and then we question ourselves as parents and go like, oh my, did I do something wrong? Why is my child feeling this way? And I um really believe that people born with, sure, there's things that us parents can get wrong, and
Sure. Sure.
that can be true. But also we are born with a certain set of wounds. And what I've noticed is that those wounds that are from past lives, where you can see the story in the chart, it will often happen again in this life. Those same wounds, it's almost so that you can remember what was going on. Something will trigger it, and how I need to remember. And what's so profound is when going through such a hard time, when I myself am going through a hard time, or you or one of my other friends is going through such a hard time, or a client, and me, and they're just like, this feels so hard. Like, what is happening? And when you look to their chart and you see their past life wounds, see the transits that are happening right now, and to be able to clarify it for people and validate them and say, yes, this is very real. You have this pain that you've carried with you for who knows how many years, before you were present on this earth. And to be able to show them a path forward, heal, to let them know they were actually put on this to heal, to give them a glimpse of the hard things to do to heal that. And when sometimes when you go through these exercises with people, and then you learn their backstory,
Mm-hmm.
those are the moments that are truly profound. um because you see how things replicated themselves in this life, and I just think, anytime we're feeling these big feelings, it I am still amazed. you know I feel like I'm like, Taylor Swift with the, face, that she that she'll make when she's so excited that, a fan loves on her. I feel like I'm like that when I see a transit that just so obviously present, and so, you know, yeah, where you really just, you see it, and you see the proof, you know, see the proof. Like I said, I spent all those years not believing. I am like kind of a skeptic by nature. And so for me, seeing the proof every time, even though I'm such a believer, also I'm like, it's just so beautiful.
Yeah. It's so interesting that that's the example that you use about like past lives and needing something to trigger, because literally just last week I was doing a reading, and I have not seen this person's chart. I am not an astrologer, but it was a new client to me. He was a man, and we very quickly, I was like, oh, we need to talk about your childhood. And you have this belief that you're not lovable, but it's not only that you're not lovable, like you have this belief that there's something wrong with you. And I said, and so actually, what happened in your childhood, if we look at it logically, it's not like nothing that bad, quote, happened that would obviously lead to have that belief. And I'm like, but you had X, Y, and Z happen in your past lives. And we did a little bit of a past life regression. And it was like, so you needed this little flicker of a reminder of that belief system so that you could heal it.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes the wounds and the traumas that we have in past life, we don't have time to heal it in the same lifetime or a couple of lifetimes. And so then we have to come in this lifetime and heal stuff that sometimes we're like, I mean, I do this sometimes with my worthiness. Like I had about an idyllic of a childhood as you can have. Like I'm like, I don't even have a right to have unworthiness. I feel that way sometimes. Like this is just, it's ridiculous. But I have it. And so having that like past life context. And so I often find that our readings like mirror each other. And you do it by looking at a chart, and I do it by talking to whoever it is I'm talking to that day.
Yeah.
But often we're equipping clients with very similar information. I'm like, this is what you need to recognize about yourself that's going to help you. And these are perhaps some paths forward into healing and growth. So to me, that's for my own personal introduction of astrology. It's like, oh, like this is another way of doing the same work. Like I'm wanting to help people transform themselves and their lives, and that's also what astrology can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I literally feel like, especially with some of my like repeat clients, and I don't want to put myself out of a job, but I'm like, they like learn their chart, they'd have a lot fewer questions for me.
Yeah.
I mean, really, they
Yeah.
would. So I just think it's so beautiful. Um, and I do want to talk about some exciting things now. Are you ready to move to exciting things?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So next week on the podcast, we are going to be sharing, I say we because it's Suzanne and I, are going to be sharing our very first ever experimental at the time um, joint reading. So we had a client and um, we got their normal birth information. Suzanne ran their chart the way she normally would. I had a chance to look at it and we talked about it ahead of time, like what all did we need to discuss in the reading. And I worked with the client's angels and guides ahead of time to talk about, which no surprise, it was pretty in line with what Suzanne was drawn to talk about anyway. Um, but then both of us were there live for the reading. So you're going to get to hear from Kelly as she has, I think, her first astrology reading, if I recall.
I think so.
And primarily, Suzanne reads the chart, but then you'll hear me every once in a while kind of interrupt to be like, the guides say we need to talk more about this, or we want to know XYZ. Um, and so Suzanne and I are going to be offering joint reading. So for those of you that are really into astrology, but are also really into channeling, this is a really unique offer. And if you want to learn more about it, the link is in bio. So I'm going to that's my quick announcement on that. Um, but the more exciting announcement, I think, is we're gonna switch gears and talk about something that Suzanne has created that, as far as I know, does not exist out there in the world. I haven't seen anything else like it. I've seen some things that are kind of similar, but they don't actually add up. So, Suzanne, why don't you tell us what you have created to help people?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to. So, okay, what I have created is started off as a simple moon journal. And going back to the beginning of what I was saying in those two buckets, I was really finding once I was diving into all of this stuff of following the moon cycles, I was like, I just want to journal about these things. When there's a Pisces full moon or a Sagittarius first quarter moon or whatever it is, like I want to write down my thoughts and I want to try to understand how it relates to these other moon phases, and how that's all connected. And I want to try I want to, you know, track that with my own personal menstrual cycle also. I want to add my mood. So I kind of started looking around to see if there was anything like that. Yeah, I really couldn't find anything, at least not exactly how I wanted. And then I had this memory of, well, I used to work in corporate and I used to actually create databases for a living way back many moons ago. And I'm like, I haven't done it in so long. I haven't worked in that kind of IT world in so long. I really loved it when I did. So I thought, okay, I'm going to merge my two worlds here. Take that business minded part of myself, that business and IT part of myself, and the spiritual part of myself. And I started just creating my own system. I created my own moon journal, really for myself, is what it started as, so that I could track everything. And I started uncovering, I mean, just the wildest things once you start tracking how these cycles relate to each other, and you really put yourself in, like I said, living within those seasons. Astrology teaches us that there's seasons upon seasons upon seasons and cycles within it. I mean, they're just going all over the place, and it can be really difficult just to have it in your head swimming around there.
Yeah.
So yeah, to have it all kept in a nice little place, for me, that really eased my mind. um so yeah, I started religiously just doing this, and I thought, if this is something that is helping me and I want, there's probably other people that want it too. And so I started kind of furthering it along and thinking how I could do this. And so I created a membership program. It's called the Moonflow membership. And what it allows you to do is, kind of like I already said, journal along with the phases of the moon. Um, and and then what I do also is I take, depending on what moon phase there is, and it's I'll send out text messages, to each member and kind of let them know, okay, here's what's happening right now in the sky with the moon phase, and here's how it relates to your own personal natal chart. So I go through, and kind of how I do that is I show, I'm not going to get too technical here, but basically what house of yours, and if you don't know anything about astrology, I'm sure you don't know the term house, but we all have houses within our natal charts. Where is this moon falling in your natal chart? And so I give an explanation of kind of what questions to be asking. Here's a journal prompt for you, how you might be feeling, that kind of thing, and send out text messages. So with each of the four major moon phases, with the new moon, with the first quarter moon, the full moon, and with the last quarter moon, I send out these text messages to my members, and they can go ahead and journal with it. They can go back and look at old entries, and like I like to do so often, is see how they relate to each other. I just had a major, I mean, last weekend, was it last weekend? I can't even
I think
remember now.
so, yeah. Yeah.
I had just, oh wow, it was rough for me, and it was a Pisces full moon, and I went back to my Pisces new moon entry from 6 months earlier, and I read what that entry was, and I was astounded at the growth that I had during that time, because in moon cycles, that's one of the biggest cycles, is the new moon in a certain sign to the full moon in that same sign, which happens about 6 months apart from each other. And
Interesting. I didn't
so,
know that.
yeah, yeah. So each full moon, it's really great to kind of go back to that new moon entry if you did one, and take a look and see what you were going through. And when I read what I had been going through and what my new moon manifestation was, I, I was blown away. I was blown away by how much I'd grown during that period, and how much I did it. I did what I wanted to do. I still have room for growth. And that was part of why the weekend was so rough for me.
Yeah.
But to be able to reflect on that, um, was just astounding. It was absolutely astounding. And so, yeah, the Moon Flow membership provides that for people. Um, what else is there? You can get a 40% off readings from me for all of my members. I do add your natal chart.
We have to pause. That is a
Okay.
huge discount.
It
So
is.
my
It
members
is.
get a 22% discount. So
Uh-huh.
40% is huge. Okay.
Yes.
Sorry to
Yes.
interrupt your flow of thought.
That's okay. That's okay. So yeah, I add your natal chart in there, so you'll always have access to that, and I add your transits for an entire year. Um, I also have a moon calendar that you can sync with your phone as well, so that you always have the moon phases in your Google or iPhone calendar.
I haven't done that yet. I need to go back and
Yeah.
do that.
Yes. 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 Um, so that's the way that the membership exists right now. I'm working on a more advanced version of the membership, which goes into details, more personalized details about the transits and things, right? Things like that. But right now, if with this level of membership, you'll just get, these are your transits, but there won't necessarily be an explanation of what that means. That's coming soon. Um, with I'm working on a lot of stuff, but for now we just have this basic version of the membership.
Well, it's not, I wouldn't call it basic. I
Yeah.
think because astrology is so complex, it might feel basic to you, but I
Mhm.
think the service that it offers is comprehensive.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Thank you for that. That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, I will say I've been a part of your membership from the beginning, and I am by nature not a journal person. And so there have been lots of times when I have not journaled. But even just receiving the prompts of this is where the moon is in your chart, and these are some questions you might ask. It's fascinating how, I mean, sometimes they're just like, it's not painful. It's comical. Like, yes, that is exactly what's happening for me. Thank you, moon. But sometimes it's not. Like sometimes it'll ask something and I'll go, "Oh, I that is happening." Like it'll bring something to my awareness that I hadn't noticed, and so it like gives me this opportunity to reflect on something that I would have missed. Um And then there have been some times when, ooh, I've gone through some things. And in hindsight, I'm like, if I had journaled about this previously, like, and you will have asked me, well, look at your journal entry from da da da. And I'll be like, well, I didn't do that. And you're like, well, journal this one. And I'm like, uh-huh. Because it's such an opportunity to come to know yourself better and know your journey and be able to reflect. Um, okay, so if people are interested in the Moonflow membership, where do they go?
They go to shedancesunderthemoon.com, and then you just click in upper right. It says Moonflow membership, I believe. Right?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's lots of exciting things. So Suzanne has her membership. We're launching joint readings, and then Suzanne and I both are in it. It'll be about 2 weeks from the time this episode airs. We'll be headed to California to go to the Astro Bash conference, which since she and I registered, they've now launched a virtual ticket. So if any of you out there are into astrology and want to hear from other evolutionary astrologers, we're geeking out about it. It's going to
We
be so
are.
great. There will also be a link in wherever you're watching this, listening to this. You can learn more about the Astro Bash conference if you want to join us virtually. So, Suzanne, anything else they should know about you, how to find you?
Oh gosh. Yeah. I mean, like I said, She Dances Under the Moon. That's my website. So you can go to that. You can find me on Instagram. You can also find me on Threads. Not like a ton going on there yet, but I love it. I'm gonna give a push for the new
For
Threads app
threads.
because
Nice.
yeah, I love it. I think it's just, I don't know, it feels like a real nice healthy atmosphere. Far different from usual social media sites. I'm not the biggest fan of social media, I will be honest. I
So people should get on your email list.
Yes, thank
Go to
you.
your
Thank you.
website and subscribe to her email list.
Yes, if you want to make sure we keep in contact, definitely go there because I do go through phases with social media. Um so
And
yeah, is
often
there
you have some, whereas Moonflow membership, maybe your journal prompts there are, this is what the moon is doing, it's in this house, here's a question. But in your emails, often you'll write a blog or something. That's a whole other gift that's for free that I would suggest to people.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, my emails do. They contain a whole plethora of, usually I really like to stick with the seasons. So
Yeah.
it has a lot to do with the seasons and the signs within the seasons. I'm adding a part to my website right now. Not quite ready yet, but where I want to go through each sign and talk about just how to live that sign while we're in that season. You know,
Ooh.
yes, that's honestly like really where my heart is just being able to fully live in the season. And I'm like, are we still in summer? Or can we like move on to fall now? Maybe when this airs, it will be fall, won't it?
Hope
It
so.
will.
I hope so.
I think it might be like the real early days of fall. So yeah, I'm ready to live there now. I've got a candle, that's like apple scented or something, and I'm like waiting to light it. Day of fall.
Oh my gosh, Appleton and Candle, good for you.
Yeah.
Um, well, yeah, so everybody, thanks for joining us. Suzanne, thanks for being here. More specifically, what I want to say is, in general, with me and my work and the idea of living out love, a lot of that is relying on knowing who you are, like knowing what makes you the little version of source, God, spirit that you are, and how you're called to show up. And so, Suzanne, what I want to say to you is thank you for helping people come to know themselves so that they can live their curriculum. What a gift.
Thank
Um, and I hope you show up next week for the podcast. You'll hear this was our very first ever joint reading. And what a fantastic, unique opportunity to have a psychic and an astrologer talking to you and answering
you.
all your questions.
Yes.
So, thanks for being here. Bye, loves.